Welcome to another episode of DD on the Spot. As always, I'm your host, Ryan Johnson. And before we get into it with our guests here today, I'd like to remind everyone that if you enjoy this content, to please give a like and subscribe down below. I'd greatly appreciate it. We have Jada Beverly on the podcast coming to us all the way from Ohio, where I hope the weather might be just a tad bit better than it is here, but we'll see about that. But she's a bodybuilder. She's going to share her health and fitness journey with us and talk all things bodybuilding. But most importantly, she's our current guest. Jada, thank you so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I got to ask first of all, because I love to torture myself. What is the weather like in Ohio today?
So right now it's pretty rainy. It's been raining pretty much all morning, and I think it's going to rain all day. The sun came out for a split second, but we're still getting drops of rain. So
Yeah.
I guess we'll take that rather than getting dumped on like New York did.
Or like it is here. Where it's like 15 degrees or something like that. But hey, you get used to it after a while. But before I get into the winter woes, because that's a whole podcast that I'm going to do myself, which is going to be 10 hours of me telling all these crappy winter stories. Why don't you give us your backstory on what inspired and motivated you, start this journey and how that's evolved into being a bodybuilder and yeah, just sort of like a backstory.
Um, so when I was younger, some kids just they're kind of born with feeling like they have some type of it factor of some sort in them. And I always just felt like I was gonna do something. I didn't really know what. Got into modeling when I was kinda young, but didn't really get to push that because it's out of your hands, it's kind of in the hands of the parents at that point. The same story with gymnastics. They pushed equestrian sports on me because that's what they wanted me to do. And then I got older and I kind of branched more into pageants. And that's really I always liked working out anyway, because I was a sporty girl. So working out was always just something that I kinda did. But when the level kind of turned more towards training to look a certain way and eating the way I had to eat to look a certain way, that kind of kicked off with pageants because there's a certain fitness that was expected of you to do pageants. But then when they told me that, you know, you have the mindset, the personality, and the looks for pageantry, but you don't have the body type for it. Um, because they don't necessarily want a very fit, structured girl, and I've always had an athletic look to me. So then I always had it in the back of my mind that I like the idea of the whole fitness industry and what they were doing at the time because of the Arnold's where I lived. So I always knew about it, but I never discovered it until I realized my pageant journeys were over. And that is when I took the first step into, you know what, let me try this out and see what I can do in a fitness competition. I mean, why the heck not? So it started there in a division that we would call like a true novice, meaning you've never exactly competed before. And it was a division called women's figure. So that's where it started, women's figure. And that would have been year 2012. So I would have been, I'm going to say 25, I think it was. So that's the starting point. That's the origin.
Yeah, well, and that's awesome. And can I say you are definitely not the first equestrian that we've had on the podcast. That's been something that really surprised me. You're like our fifth or sixth one where it's like I'm surprised that so many people really still did that. But yeah, that's awesome. But how tall are you if you started out as a model and then did gymnastics?
Yeah, I'm one of those heights where like I can fit into most things because I'm not too short, but I'm also not too tall. I'm right at 5'7.5".
Oh, okay, yeah.
So
Because I was gonna say, yeah, with modeling and gymnastics, I don't think I've ever heard of someone doing both ever. Because I was like, yeah, it's kind of a height requirement for both. But yeah, that's amazing. And
well, it depends on what kind of modeling it is. If
yeah,
it's
that
like
too.
fake or print or spread, it's different. If it's like runway, that's a whole
Yeah.
nother thing. I never did
Yeah,
runway.
which is what
Never.
everyone associates with when you say modeling, I think, just because that's the one thing that really just pops in
Yeah.
their head. But yeah,
No, I
that's
never did. I did print and spread.
oh,
Yeah.
okay, yeah. So that's great too. But when you were getting started working out, for so many people, they just have that struggle of finding out what works best for them because it's so much trial and error, finding out what works best for your individual body. What was that like for you, sort of figuring that out because it's different for every single person?
Yeah, it was the same trial and error. It takes time. You can spend the money and listen to someone who doesn't really know your body unless you get lucky and you do find a personal trainer that actually knows what's going on. But I already had the nick of a personal trainer's perspective, which is why I got into that field for at the beginning, to understand what's really going on. And I am in very I'm very in tune with my body, so I was able to understand what was going on with it and watch it. Something wasn't working, I would switch it up, try that, and then that would show me different results. So I learned at a young age that, well, it didn't take much for me to put muscle on, and it was harder for me to make it hard, lean, and tone. So
Yeah, for so many people, that's the difference between really bodybuilding and just being like your average gym bro, where you really gotta learn how to lean it out and tone it out. But I love to talk genetics on this podcast because so many people in this day and age are on social media sites, and it's oh my god, I want his arms, I want her abs, I want their back. It's like you can only be the best version of yourself. I don't know how many people have to shake down and just be like, you do not know how they got to that look. Some people are just blessed with genetics. Where I mean, we've had people on here where I could have swore they were born with a 12 pack, and it's like, okay, screw you, because that's just not right. But whenever someone first gets started, they always have that one body part that really, really takes off that they don't have to train as much. And they have that one body part that just drags behind, they have to train to oblivion. What were those body parts for you?
everybody has those.
Yeah.
Some people have multiple of
Yep.
those. For me for me, the parts that were easy for me to develop and train were actually a few. I never struggled with, my back and chest or arms. Um, my abs are pretty neutral. If I eat right, do the cardio, and train them, they come in just fine. My quads were never an issue. Hamstrings were harder. Glutes were harder for me. Calves and teardrops were the issues for me. So, um, for as far as yeah, I guess those would be mainly more so lower extremities. I did have the advantage over the quads. They did grow. They love to grow, but it was the other parts surrounding that were a little tough to get what I wanted them to do.
Oh yeah, well I'm 6'3", so I totally understand the lower body stuff. Where that's the number one pet peeve for. I could do 10,000 calf raises a day, and they won't gain an ounce. So I'm
It's
just one of
hard.
those.
The
Yeah.
taller you are, the more the calf stretches. So that's very yeah, and the same with the, long muscle bellies versus short muscle bellies. That's the issue right there. I was very lucky for as tall as I am to have quite good quads on my legs. I just have to work a little harder to maintain the teardrops as well as the hamstrings.
Yeah, I cannot tell you how many times I have to explain to people when they're like, "Oh, why don't you look as good as so and so?" And I was like, "Well, they're 5 feet tall, so their muscle bellies are a little bit easier to develop than
Yeah,
just the long
nobody
and
understands
lengthy stuff." Yeah,
that until you explain it to them.
yeah, yeah.
And what's funny is when you're watching, competitions such as bodybuilding, nobody when once you get to the pro level, everyone seems to forget that the height advantage is no longer there anymore. Everybody is competing against everybody with every height range, and people tend to forget that you look at somebody and you're so impressed, and then you come to find out, like, oh, wow, when you see them or read their bio or see them in person, he's 5'7"? And you're thinking all this time he was at least, I don't know, 5'11", maybe, something. Yeah, it's funny.
That's the Tom Cruise effect, where everyone, if you don't know that, Tom Cruise is like 5'4", 5'6", or something like that. Where it's like,
Yeah,
yeah, yep, yep, absolutely, yeah. So that's yeah. I couldn't. That's one thing that really shocked me as well. Where it's like, yeah, if you were to meet some of these bodybuilders in person, I could basically dribble them like a basketball, basically,
they
because I'm
are
6'3". So
tiniest
yeah,
people. They are
yeah,
so little.
yeah.
So the ones that are truly, no offense against all the people in bodybuilding, they all work hard, but some of the ones that are truly impressive are the tall ones that are massive. That's impressive.
Yeah, if you're like in the upper 5 feet or lower 6 feet, and you still got like that really hard muscle belt, and you're just like jacked, that I have even more respect for you, because I know deep down what that struggle is like to get into it. Yeah, absolutely. Well, and the number one thing that I mean, it's talked about a little bit, but it's not talked about as much as it should be, is the nutrition that goes into this lifestyle. What were some of the bigger changes that you made just starting out with? And then you always have to evolve it as well. I mean, you can never really get your nutrition down pat for a sustained amount of time, because your body's just going to keep evolving.
I mean, true. With me, it was actually staying true to a diet plan because when I first began, it sounded easy, but it wasn't easy. And until you want something bad enough and then you start to see the results that it gives you when you actually follow the plan, over time, and with me it took years to actually be more disciplined. But at the beginning, I mean, when you are doing the level of fitness that I'm doing, I mean, things get pretty darn restrictive. So, I mean, most of what you're eating is going to be protein. and then depending on where your needs are, and this is where macros came into my life a year ago. I realized that fat and carbs had to be played with a little bit more than I thought. Sometimes you'll find yourself having those almost equaled out, which is really strange to some people. And then if you're not coming in lean enough fast enough, then you find yourself kind of tweaking those a little bit more, where you might raise one and really drastically drop the other. So macros was a really new thing that helped me maintain the look that I needed to actually turn pro. Because before then, I was still dieting pretty restrictively, but it wasn't monitored the way it needed to be, and I didn't have the ability to play with certain numbers like I can now to stay at a certain calorie level to keep myself in a depletion.
Yeah. No, and I mean it's a science, and so many people it's trial and error just trying to figure it out because and some people just get lucky on their first try, but it takes years for so many people, but especially when you're going on that prep, I mean, like you're talking about, it's a whole mindset. It's everything's so scientific when it comes to getting your workouts in and your nutrition and getting the proper amount of sleep. What was that adjustment like for you when you first did your first prep and just realized that like, "Oh my god, this is a whole different world."
Well, that's why fitness has its levels when you're going from novice to amateur to pro level. Um, because at the novice level, it wasn't so drastic. Um, because of the pageants that I had done, I was able to kind of transform into that a little easier. But obviously, it wasn't that good because it was still something I struggled with because I didn't understand how long you had to really prep for to get to a certain look like that with having all that body fat come off you as a female. So it's a little tougher. So I would slip up. But if I would have had to go directly into it like I had to do for the pro level like I am now, back then, I probably I probably wouldn't have made it. I probably would have been like, "You know what? I can't do this. This is insane." And then over years, it gets the industry gets harder and harder. So then you got to push a tiny bit more. And so it keeps moving up a level. So you find yourself like, oh man, like is there it's an infinity and beyond almost. It's like you every year you can prep harder and there's still another level that you can achieve. But I am my body over time has adapted to this eating, okay, which is very crazy. And each year I got better and better at following that diet plan. And the body starts adapting to it better. So you can follow it better without having ridiculous cravings and wanting to go off plan. And I also learned that it's a kind of no, it's a zero tolerance thing. If you're gonna not eat something, you're better off. If you do slip up and then you eat something, that's when the binge fits happen because you get a little bit of something and then you want more, and it's a problem. And I've seen people struggle in their competition preps by allowing themselves, oh well, if I just eat a little bit, it's fine. No. So yeah, over time you just get better. Like you train for something for years, you diet for years, and you just start to get a little bit better each time.
Which is why I say if you're someone in like in my generation where everyone wants everything now and they want it yesterday, it's like, no, this is not the lifestyle for you. Which is why I think so many young people when they try, getting healthy and fit, they're just like, oh, I went there, I went to work out like 2 weeks in a row. Why am I not seeing any of these like great results that
Yeah,
it's like,
they
yeah,
wanna see results right away. The only thing that they're really gonna see right away when they first start out, and if they are cleaning up their diet, is probably a water loss drop because of, cleaning up the diet, and their body's gonna hold on to less water. And then, after that initial week is over, then they see, like, a stagnant week of, like, 2 to 3 weeks where nothing's happening, and they're like, "This isn't working anymore." But that's not true. You just got the water off. Now we're working on eating away at that fat slowly, and it's slow. It takes time.
absolutely. And how did your training change when you won your pro card? Because for so many people, I mean, that's when the real hard work begins.
Um, it didn't it didn't change a whole heck of a lot more. I just had to be a little more focused in the off season. I had to prep a little bit longer for the pro shows. I had to take in a lot more supplements, and I had to obviously clean the diet up that much more. So it was that's why these fitness levels are nice, because you're not thrown into something that's just going to be shockingly insane. So it's just like another milestone step up. And this year I'm crossing over into a different division. So for what I did this year, it's got to take another step up for next year. And each prep and each season I just get better and better at it. No one has a flawless season or a flawless prep, but all you can do is get better and better at it. And when it comes to Olympia time, that's the real competition. Who was able to maintain the best conditioning and the best, whatever at that very moment of the very show. It's crazy because when you're a pro, everybody looks good.
But yeah, with that training, yeah, it's nice that you're able to, find what works for you and really still do that. But yeah, just the grinding, I think it really just becomes so much more prevalent. But the number one thing that I would have never guessed in a million years that I learned from this podcast is that for so many of these competitors, posing is the hardest thing for them. It's harder than you're working out. It's harder than your nutrition. What has your relationship with posing been like? How has that journey been like for you?
I love to do it, but it is a challenge because you got to start early, because it's not just about doing the mandatory poses that you have to do for your division, but you have to figure out how you can do them that looks best for you. Because there's the mandatory poses, but they can also be altered in a slight tiny bit to work for your body type, and you're still doing the mandatory pose that they're asking. So there's that perspective. And you sometimes don't know what's looking best for you until you're about 4 weeks out of a show and you're like really getting lean. The second thing that was difficult, obviously, and this is going to be for everybody, is the time frame of holding those poses and maintaining those holds without slipping up, without shaking, and without losing your hold for the abdominal region to stay looking tight. And that's even IFBB pros on the Olympia stage struggle with that. But it just you just have to be dedicated to it. It just takes practice, practice, practice. It does get easy. It's never easy, easy, but it does get easy. And it's funny because the poses, as the divisions change, they get harder. Like bodybuilders and physiques, those are some those are some of the hardest to pose because you have to pose in a certain way to show all these different muscles. Figure for women, men's physique, not nearly as bad. Bikini, misfit body, or what do they call it now? Miss Wellness. Those poses, heck of a lot easier. But I guess that's for them, they have to stand in heels. So that's the difference. Although when I did that figure, you stand in heels, but you don't have to flex like you do if you're a woman's physique or bodybuilder. But I never had a problem with the heels. And a lot of women had the problem with the heels. You know why I think I didn't have problem with the heels? I think I lucked out because I had done pageants previously. That's why.
That has been, I mean, I cannot tell you how many times we've heard that that's the reason why people move from figure to physique is because of those heels. We're like, finally, I don't have to wear those heels anymore. But out of your poses that you do, what is your favorite pose to do and what is your least favorite pose to do?
I depending on how lean I just got, I liked all of my poses because that was the way I wanted to that's how my coaches that I've had in the previous years, you want to train to be fully rounded. If you want to be a pro and you want to make it all the way to the top, you're supposed to have those poses down to a point that every one of those poses are supposed to be your favorite. But for a while there, I didn't like doing poses where I had to show my lower backside because that was a weak point. Now that I've been majorly bringing that up to par, I've been doing things that have really been making myself way more comfortable in showing that. It wasn't the back, it was the lower half. We call it the posterior chain, where it's the glutes, the hams, and the lower legs. Um, so the poses that I'm probably the best at right now, I've always had a very good chest and arms. So any side poses that display that. Um, and a lot of women will say that they don't like the ab and thigh pose, but you see, I always had abs, so I never had a problem with that pose. You know, I really like them all. And I just want to perfect them and make them all better. because every single one show a different advantage of me.
Yeah, if I would have done a poll, that ab and thigh is like 90% of the answer that we get for like what is one that your least favorite pose, and I just think
Most
yeah,
don't like that one,
because
but I
it
always
yeah,
yeah.
yeah. I think one of it too is just because it's such an awkward pose for so many. It's hard to make it look kind of like it's kind of hard to make it blend in with all the other poses. But for that's just for some people. But yeah, I agree. Some people they're just naturally blessed with nice abs and stuff where it comes so much easier for them.
Yeah, but a lot of women are gonna say that they don't like that one,
Yeah.
for
Yep.
sure.
Absolutely. And when you walk up on that stage, after prepping for months upon months, what is that feeling like for you when you finally get to show off all that hard work that you've worked so much on?
It's kind of interesting because sometimes when you're getting ready for a show, you think you're ready, and then you get there and you're like, "Oh, crap. I may have missed the mark on this one." You're looking around and you're seeing that people are a little bit leaner. If you're in that unfortunate position, which all competitors have been in, we call it coming in off incidentally. We didn't mean to, we just missed the mark. It's actually fearful. It's actually like, "Oh, crap. I want to get this over with," because you don't want to disappoint the judges because they notice that kind of stuff. You don't want to disappoint those that came and saw you. And you're not trying to really disappoint yourself. So that is a very tender moment where you're like, how far off of the mark did I miss? So you can be very nervous the whole time, wondering if you're looking at least halfway decent. Now, on the flip side of that, when you know you're bringing your best that you've ever brought, and you're like, no matter who's around me, I'm still looking good too in my own way. There's an anxiety when you're basically and see for me as a pro, I had to go first for most of my shows this year because of my name where it falls in my category. So the anticipation kind of kicks in and you feel a lot of anxiety, and that's when I've had the most like nerves. When I'm almost ready to go and I'm standing on that step waiting to be called out, right? The weirdest thing. That's when the heartbeat was like the craziest. And you're just like, okay, I need to breathe. I need to calm down. And then as soon as you step onto that stage and start walking out to those judges, it's the weirdest thing with that coat of anxiety falls off. And you're like, okay, it's go time. Here it is. And the lights hit. And I don't know, maybe that's the pageant crap in me coming out again. But I'm not stage fright until 3 seconds before I step onto the stage. So it's like it's the 3 seconds before that I'm like, oh shit, here we go. And then I step onto the stage and all is great.
And that's yeah, that's something that I get a lot with the competitors. But when they announce your name and you realize, oh my god, I won my pro card, what was that like for you? Because so many people don't understand that for so many of these competitors, that's the highlight of their career, just because that's the affirmation that all that hard work that they put into it has finally paid off.
Yeah, it was strange for me because when I went to USA's, I knew I was looking great. I was feeling confident and I was like, I hope this is the day. I mean, there was something in me that was saying that it was, but you just never know. So um it was between me and this other girl, but I knew that she might have been a little larger down below. But I knew that overall, her balance wasn't like mine was, the flow of everything and the balance and structure, and she lacked the conditioning that I lacked. So, um, I was holding my breath for a second there when they called for second place. And as soon as they called her name, that's when it was like, finally. I mean, it was kind of like a relief. I was like, I finally got this daggone pro card. I remember because Bob Citarella was the announcer at that show, and I think I remember turning around and facing the wall, and I kind of like bent over, and I was like, it was funny. Like my reaction was very interesting, and that was the first time that I had done USA's. So, and that is a very prestigious. If there is any place that you want to get a pro card, it's USA's. It's the most prestigious. So that was very exciting that that's where it happened for me. There has been more Olympias that have been turned Olympian winners or just overall like very good Olympian athletes that have got their pro cards at USA's. So
Yeah, and that's definitely if you're gonna get it, yeah, like she said, you should get it there. But I mean, one myth and stereotype that I love to bust on this podcast is that so many people have that belief that that look that you present on stage is sustainable, and it isn't. I mean, you're not gonna be able to look that way 24/7. I bet you hear that all the time too. We get that reaction every time. Yeah, I wish it was too, but yeah.
psychologically, I still wanna believe that it is, and every year I get disappointed in myself 'cause I'm like, "Great, now I'm fat. Why can't I be like that?" Every year it happens. Every year as the diet changes, as the cardio drops out, as the training gets lighter, as the supplements fall, every single year, like, I just can't get it through my psychological head that, "I'm sorry, you can't sustain this look all year." And even though as bad as I want to, and I think for me, that's one of the reasons why I can hold my prep for 4 to 5 months long, is because I'm so in love with the way I'm looking that I don't wanna let it go. So that's why I've been, like, kind of making a bad decision and pushing myself into a 5th show, which 2 years in a row, we've has proven that that is a bad idea. I should stop at 4. 4 is my number, and 5 is just out of the it's just out of the question because every time we've done it, I've showed up where you can tell that I struggled. I was starting to get hungry, and my body was fighting against me too because it didn't wanna be in prep anymore, and it wasn't responding the way it was responding earlier. So, for me, um, 5-month max for pretty restrictive dieting and showing back to back about 4 shows, and then we've gotta cut it.
Mm, yeah. Well, and I mean, the one thing that really plays into that too is it's the bane of my existence. It's cardio. I mean, I hate it more than life itself. I'm one of those people where, and when I say cardio, I mean like actual running. Like I can walk on a treadmill for like 10 hours a day, and I'd be
Yeah, you
fine
don't
with it.
the other
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah, just the
Yeah,
ugly
the
stuff. But what is your relationship with cardio like, especially during preps? Because so many people. I mean, we've heard extremes on here where it's just insane. But what is your personal cardio experience like?
I haven't had to do the extreme, but maybe that's coming 2021. Um, for me, it starts off slow and it starts off a little bit, um, it's like 12 weeks out. And we started at like 5 days a week for 45 minutes. And I always try to keep it a little bit mixed up. So I'm going to do 2 or 3 different things that week to keep my body from getting used to the same thing. As we climb closer, we add another day and we add about 5 minutes more. And then usually for me, 6 to 7 weeks out was when I started to add some running in there. Because before that, I was probably on the Stairmaster a little bit more frequently. And then as we add running in, we pull back a little bit on the Stairmaster because Stairmaster is good, but it's kind of in a weird sense for me, it's like a balker. So for me to really start getting tight and lean in the legs, we got to pull that back a little bit and use that as a hit. So like you'll be high intense, on the Stairmaster for a good solid minute, drop it down and do that, for about 10, 12 times or whatever. That's what we use that for. Then we cut that out, couple days before the show. We want to let the posterior chain relax and get tight again. But running starts about 6 to 7 weeks out. And I don't do it to a point where it's going to run me down. I do it to the point where it's just going to help me burn those extra fat cows and keep the legs toned and get tight. And so for me, that would be 3 times a week, up to about a mile and a half, and then pretty much no more. And we just leave it at that. That's what has shown to work. Um, and then as I get closer and closer, I think the most cardio I've ever had to do was about um, an hour and a half per day. Well, not per day, but 6 days a week, an hour and a half. So I would do, 50 minutes to an hour in the morning, finish up the rest after the final workout.
Yeah. So the only problem with me is that like I need to be entertained if I'm doing anything of cardio. So like I need to have a movie on or something. I ran out of movies to watch, but now with the new year, new movies have come out on like HBO and Netflix. So I am good to go with that. But the most important thing, I don't care what anyone says when it comes to, health and fitness. It's also the most important thing basically in anyone's life is sleep. I mean, I don't care what anyone says. Anyone who tells me different, I always tell them, okay, pull an all-nighter and then go to the gym and then tell me how that works for you. I tried it twice in college and I lasted about halfway through and I was like, screw this. I'm done. I'm going back and going to sleep. But What does your sleep schedule look like, especially during preps too, where I mean, sleep is 10 times more important, but it's harder to get that sleep when you're so deprived and just down low.
It is. So usually, in the first when I start prep about 4 months out, the first month and a half is fine. I sleep great. Now, when my body starts to reach a certain leanness, and it could be anywhere from having 15% body fat or 14ish, somewhere around, I'm going to say the 16 to 14 marker, my body does a really strange thing where we go through just kind of requiring less sleep. It's weird. Every year I've seen this happen where my body will let me sleep for about 4 to 6 hours, and that's it. And then when I get even leaner, and that's when I'm cracking that 13, 12%, it does something even more strange where I literally go through, and it usually starts right before or during or right after my very first competition. I literally go through this episode of insomnia, kind of. And it usually lasts for about 2 approximate weeks where I am literally living off of 2 to 3 hours of sleep. I don't know why this happens, but it's very strange, and we try to combat it by using sleep aids and relaxants and things like that. And some
Are you just addicted to caffeine at this point?
No, no, it's not, no, not yet. No, it happened to me last year, it happened to me this season, and I would lay in bed for a solid 5 hours, but only 2.5 to 3 of that I actually slept. But a lot of things people don't realize is even when the body is lying still, even luckily I was able to do that. My physical body is resting, maybe not my brain, but at least the physical body is resting. But, we also need that mental rest too. So we struggle through that for 2 weeks long, and then that seems to fade out and go away. And then I start to get my original sleep pattern back, which is anywhere from 6 to 7 hours when I'm in prep.
Yeah, I mean, that is just, it's so undervalued, I think, by so many people. And just, I always say, that moment when you wake up from a long night's sleep after a heavy day training, I mean, there's almost no better feeling in the world. You feel like a super human, basically, just because you feel so well rested. But one training technique that I wasn't really that familiar with until I really started this podcast, I mean, I did it a couple times, is time and attention and using that mind to muscle connection. Is that something that you like to do a lot in your training?
Yeah, I think once you become pro, it's inevitable. You kind of can't not do that, because that tension is everything. That form is everything. The positive and the negatives holds in the gym that so many people don't even think about, which is all part of obviously your form. Because when you start to cut, you're doing high volume training and not so much just pushing heavy weight. Like right now, I'm doing a little bit less of that mind, connection because I'm just trying to push some heavy weight. But I'm also trying to keep my form too. But when we start to get really depleted with our food and really depleted in the gym with all of the high repetitions that we're doing, that's when that kind of thing comes more into play. And that's how we learn to do some really good training with high volume. When I say high volume, I'm talking about a medium weight, and you're hitting sets beyond 16, like it's somewhere between 16 to even up to 30. Um, and so that some people will tell you is harder than pushing heavy weight.
Yeah, I mean, I've done some burnout sets where, yeah, I can tell anyone, once you get to that last set, it's the hardest thing that you can do.
Then
But
you barely make that last one.
yeah, and then you get made fun of because it's like, oh, you can't curl 10 pounds. It's like, yeah, well, I started out at 90, and then I worked my way down 10. So, yeah, but yeah, I always found that fascinating. But I mean, now we get to the big elephant in the room, the coronavirus, because it's one thing that has impacted our lives in more ways than we can imagine. What has your experience during this pandemic been like, being a bodybuilder? And I mean, gyms were shut down for a portion. I mean, how did you deal with all of this?
I semi got kind of lucky. It did push some of my shows back and forth. So I had to pull off of a really tough prep that I was on, kind of pull it back a little bit and just go back into maintenance. So I had to do that a couple times. Two of my shows had gotten canceled I was going to go to. So it kept me in prep a little longer. But I got lucky because I know some people in my area that had private gyms. Okay. I had a couple of friends that had smaller private little gyms. So we were able to maintain a little bit of fitness just by being able to go there and at least maintain a little bit, okay? I also have a job where I'm able to stop working mid spring and all of summer so that I can do my competitions. So we made the decision that we were going to make a trip to Tennessee because they were the first gym to they only shut down for maybe 3 weeks. Ohio was actually still kind of opened. So I experienced having to go to the buddies gym for only 2 weeks, and then we went down to Tennessee and we trained for a good 10 no, 10 days. That is when my official competition prep into the show that I was going to actually do, which was July 18th. That's when it started. Because down there, the weather was better in May, that the gyms were open. All you had to do was wear a mask. And we went down there and I was able to start cardio. That's so important because I couldn't do it here in Ohio because the weather was too bad still. By the time we came back 3 days later, the gyms would reopen. So I got lucky.
Yeah. Jeez, yeah, yeah, that is very lucky. And I love to ask this to all of the competitors that we have on because so many people in this day and age, I mean, they want to get in shape. They just lack the proper knowledge on how to do it. And especially since we're talking on New Year's Day, I mean, this is everyone's going to be crowding the gyms. I don't know if they're going to be this year because of COVID, but yeah, yeah. What advice do you have for people that are just looking to get started on their fitness journey?
So the first thing okay, they need to really think about this because if they want it bad enough, they will do what they need to do and they will make it a lifestyle. Because you've got people that think they want something and they obviously don't want it that bad, do they? Um, it's a three-pronged process, okay? Mentally, you have to make a decision that I am going to do this and I'm going to stick this out for 3 weeks because once 21 days passes by, things become a routine. Your body's used to that. And then you can't stop because you're used to it. You've already broken through the barrier of the toughness. So if they can stick that part out after having a one-to-one conversation with themselves and really asking themselves the question, do I really want this? Because let me tell you, it can be done. It can be done. Anybody can get fitness results. You just have to put in the work and the time. Okay. So if they can get past the 21 days, they're in. Um, but there's two things to it. Well, actually three. You got to put in the resistance training. You got to throw in a little bit of cardio and you've got to clean up the diet. When you can do at least three of those, at least 50%, okay? I'm not even asking you to go 100%. You got to be 100% strict. You got to be 100% this, that. But you just have to do all three of those because that is the only way that you're going to actually see things starting to work because somebody can go to the gym and then they go to Applebee's every day.
Yep.
Do you see what I'm saying?
I couldn't agree with you more. I mean, I have friends that still think they can go to Burger King 2 or 3 times a week and still be in shape, and it's like, yeah, no, maybe not.
Because here's the only thing they're going to notice. They're not going to notice that their body is changing and looking more aesthetically pleasing. All they're going to notice is that they've gotten stronger. They've been going to the gym. They've been getting stronger because they've been pushing those weights, but they're feeding their body whatever. So they're not seeing it, but they're feeling it. If you want to see it and feel it, you kind of have to clean the diet up. Because let's be honest, the food that we eat every day, it's full of salt, it's full of sugar. And those are the things that make people hold on to body fat and water.
Yep, yeah, unfortunately, that is true, but yeah, it's just yeah, so many things that really go into it. But a question that I always ask is because the moment that you said that your shoulders were really one thing and arms were really one thing that really took off. I mean, for women, shoulders and arms are probably one of the most common answers that I get is something that they struggle with to grow. So what does that look like for you when it comes to training? Because I would get probably yelled at by all these people commenting down below. Why didn't you ask her how she grows those? Because everyone's looking for that fix.
Well, yeah, the shoulders. See, that's the funny part. I had the arm.
I was surprised that she was able to find a sweater that fits her. I'm gonna be honest by looking at some of her Instagram posts.
No. The shoulders. It was something I didn't even recollect. Like I didn't even process it at the time. that I was supposed to be working shoulders. I was doing back and I was doing chest and I was doing arms. And I was at the OSU gym, it's called the RPAC, and a guy came up to me and he was like, "You know, you have a really good you have a really good look to you. You have really good ability to build muscle and looks like you have pretty decent genetics." He's like, "But the only thing I would criticize you on is your shoulders. If you could work on those." I don't know, that must have sent a jolt down my spine, and I started looking at myself in the mirror and I'm like, "Damn, he's right." That's when shoulders never got missed.
Which that separates the average Joe from the bodybuilder too, where the average Joe would be fine just having a huge upper body and no legs and just be like, oh yeah, that works for me. And I'm not gonna lie, I suffered for that in college too, where I was like, I neglected my legs a little bit, but hey, they've caught up to me. But two of the last questions before we wrap things up. I mean, if we were to talk to you a year from today, and again, if we were to talk to a year ago yesterday and you would have predicted a global pandemic and everything that's gone down, I would have called you a liar and I would have bet all my life savings against it. So it goes to show that we have no idea what it's gonna be like. But in an ideal world a year from today, where would you like to be at in your bodybuilding? Where would you like to just be at in your overall life? What are some goals that you'd like to have achieved?
My goal this year is I was hoping to win one this last season, but it didn't happen for me. So I need to win a pro show so I can qualify for the Olympia because I think that's really when a lot of doors are going to open for me. And when I say doors, I mean doing more things like this, having a voice for the women in my sport. Because we need more of that. We need women like me to tell other women that you don't have to look scary and manage to enjoy going to the gym and sculpturing your body to look like a goddess or whatever. You could still be feminine and beautiful and have an impressive physique, you know? They need to see more of that. I also hope that it would bring more doors opening for me to help more clients, that my clientele would grow and that I can make more of a difference in that aspect, as well as just bringing my life more to a better, well being of livelihood and not struggling so much like I did this year to compete that I could get, more sponsors and endorsements. It makes our life a lot easier because I want to have longevity in the sport. And even when I retire, I still want to be doing something in the sport, whether it might be having my own shows or being a coach or a judge someday, anything like that. So like I don't plan to go anywhere anytime soon. So so I'm really hoping that I could make that goal. I mean, I dare say it, I almost hope to almost have a amazing journey as Andrea did this year. I mean, she won every pro show she was in. I saw her at every one of them. We were in Omaha back in July, and she won that. It was her qualification, and then she turned around and won Wings of Strength. So,
Yeah, that was awesome. And yeah, we wish you nothing but the best of luck on that. And I'll leave a link to all of her stuff down below, and everyone go and check that out. And if you want to have her as a trainer, I'm sure she'd be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have. But lastly, is there anyone that you'd like to give a shout out to before we wrap things up?
oh, I mean, first off, thank you, Jake Woods, for bringing back women's bodybuilding. Thank you, to the judges that have steered me into the direction of trying to help me figure out where I belong. Thank you so much for all my sponsors. You know who you are. I know you don't like me to give out names, but you know who you are. Thank you so much for making this year possible for me. And of course, my sidekick, Andrew Nodemeyer. Thank you for always being there. And my coach is Sean Wicked slash Sean Wicked from Arizona. That's what we call him, Mr. Wicked. Thank you for being a great coach and also see you later leader team who's always been on my side and a good coaching team that was with me when I turned pro.
That is awesome. And yeah, shout out to all those people down below. And lastly, is there anything else that you'd like to say before we wrap it up?
Thank you for so much for having me on the show. And if we ever do this again,
Oh, we will. We will. I love having you on. You were a great guest to talk to. You're definitely coming back on. You kidding me? Yeah.
yeah, well, hopefully we'll have something even more excited to talk to you. Like,
Yes.
hey, won my first bodybuilding show.
Yeah.
I'm on my way to the Olympia.
Yeah.
like,
Absolutely. That's what I think it's gonna be. But again, you guys, yeah, go and give her a follow. I'll leave a link to all that stuff down below. And again, you guys, this is Ryan Johnson, DD on the spot, signing out. Have a great day, everyone.